start off by just putting why you're here. So what type of burnout situation are you dealing with? So Britta, Holly, like what is it? Is it just you have too much on your schedule? Is it understaffing, like where maybe you're taking on more responsibilities from other people? Is it just not understanding how to prioritize your time? Is it just a slew of tons of things, right? Like what are you dealing with in terms of your burnout? So if you want to drop that in the chat, that way I can direct some of my examples specifically towards what you are dealing with. What we're going to do today is I'm going to go over, like I said, I'll briefly touch on part one in case you didn't get a chance to check out part one. It is on my YouTube channel, so you can go back and watch it. But I'm going to go over part two of how to get clarity on what you're dealing with your burnout right now, and then what to do to kind of get out of it. And then part three is going to be some long-term solutions as well. So before I kind of get into that, I do just want to share a little bit more about me, Britta. Obviously, you know me, but Holly, you haven't got a chance to get to know me yet. So why am I the person talking about burnout? Like, what do I know about the situation? Well, definitely, like once I got to a point in my in my 20s when I was like, okay, I'm actually committing to my career and like this is what I'm going to do. I was like, okay, I got to go back to school. I went to ASU. That's why I ended up coming to Arizona to get my MBA. So working full time, going to school full time, like that's a lot. That's like a heavy workload. Trying to figure out how to balance that, trying to figure out how to make sure that I'm handling all my responsibilities, competing priorities, having a heavy schedule, right? Then you switch into the corporate world where I was getting into a management position. So I'm talking about managing teams of up to 50 people at a time, right? So that's a lot of responsibility, heavy workload again, time management. I work in an operations environment. So I've always been like an operations process improvement. So you're typically putting out fires all the time. We're the people that have to deal with something is broken, something isn't working. We need reporting, we need customer satisfaction, right? Like, so this is a high demand job where it is very easy to get overwhelmed by these different type of things. So I'm saying all this to say, like, I know exactly where you've been. I've been in jobs where I have a lot on my plate. I have a lot of direct reports that I'm trying to manage. I have a lot of projects or responsibilities that I'm working on. When I left, I was working at Drive Time. When I left Drive Time, I worked for Covington, which is a startup. So now I'm in a startup environment, which if you've ever worked in a startup is a completely different game in and of itself because everything is new, everything is being explored. You usually have a very, very small team. So we were wearing a lot of different hats, and I was able to build Covington up to the company it is now 5 years later. And I'm the vice president of operations, which means I'm running the entire company, multiple departments. So like I know a thing or two about competing priorities, having a hectic schedule, having a lot of demands. And the real thing about when you're dealing with burnout, so like Britta, you're saying too much work and could need more help, right? So like that's part of the thing is like, it's not that you don't want to work hard. It's not that you're, oh my gosh, I just don't want to work and I just want to do the minimum. That's not who you are. That's not who I was, right? I want to do a good job. I want to give my all. I don't even mind working extra sometimes, right? Like I don't mind, like, okay, you need some help, I'm willing to help, but there's a point where it gets to being the burnout. There's a point where our negative emotions build. There's a point where that resentment starts to become too much and it starts to feel like this has gone too far. Like we're getting to a place where if I don't get out of this situation, I'm not really sure that I want to stay in this job. And like that's the hardest feeling, right? Of like, oh my gosh, like if this is what my future is at this job, like I don't know if I want to stay here. And that's such a hard feeling to have because you didn't get here overnight, right? Like this wasn't like you just woke up one day and was like, this is what happened. This was a gradual progression over time. And now we got to try to get you out of it in terms of, kind of retracting some of this so you can stay in the position you're in. Or maybe like I said, we're going to go through the questions. When we get through the questions, maybe your clarity is that it is time to move on because there isn't a way for you to get out of the position, right? So anyway, we'll go through that. I just wanted to give you a little bit more background about me. Again, I've been through this. I know what you guys are dealing with. I still work, at Covington as vice president of operations while I'm running my business. So I completely understand schedule conflicts, priority conflicts. I completely understand those things. My mouse is being difficult right now. 1 second. Okay. So Let me real quick run you through part one tips that I shared. I'm not going to have time to go through all of that because I want to, respect your time today. But the part one, the main thing is anytime I have a problem. So, like in corporate world, Jovita, in business world, Jovita. So, this is like a pro tip. If you need a problem solving pro tip, this is how I solve all the major problems that I face in like my career corporate life. You have to attack it in three different ways. So you have your band-aid quick solution. Anytime somebody is bringing you a problem or you have a problem that you know about, you need to think about what is the quick solution that you can get. That was my part one. I'm going to talk about that. Part two is what we're doing today. This is the short term. We need to implement some process changes. We need to implement some things for the next 30 days that are going to make a difference, that are going to start to move us in a different direction. And then part three is going to be the long term solution so that we don't get back into this again, right? So that we actually are setting proper boundaries and managing expectations and understanding how to communicate so that we are not getting back in this situation again in the future, right? So the band aid was part one, short term solutions, 30-day solutions. That's what we're doing today. And then the long term solutions, that's what we will do next Saturday. Like I said, let me know if this date, the Saturday and the time works for you all. I'm happy to, adjust if I need to, but I want to make sure that I am doing it when people are available. Okay, so a couple of things that I mentioned in part one. So the band-aid of like when you're dealing with burnout and you're like either already at burnout or you're really, really close to burnout, maybe you're afraid that you're about to get to burnout. What is the band-aid solution? So you're not going to be able to just magically make all your schedule and stuff clear away in a band-aid solution. The band-aid solution is your mindset. The band-aid solution is you have to try to get yourself in a positive mindset so that you can make the right decisions for step two and step three. So, what do I mean by that? So, you guys probably all have had an experience in your life, whether it's personal or professional, where you have such built up negative emotions, whether that's exhaustion, whether that's your confidence is so low because you're like, oh my gosh, why am I not able to do this? And I should be able to do this, or your resentment is so high because you feel like why are they giving me all this work? They have to know that I can't handle all this work, right? So whatever it is, your negativity is so high, and so it causes you to make bad decisions. Anytime we're in a negative headspace, we don't always make the best decisions because we're just only thinking about how we feel at the moment. It's so hard for us to think about, well, let me try to think about the positives. Let me try to think about a way to get out of it. It's like you're in it. And so it's really hard for you to think like that. I have definitely been there where it's like you're so upset and you're so angry and you just want to like react. And so when you do that, it ends up turning you could regret your decision, right? You could regret the things that you're doing, which is only going to lead to further burnout and negative emotions and drainage. So my band-aid for part one was we got to get your mindset right with like a quick, easy thing to get your mindset right. So I talked to you about the morning routine because that's a simple thing that you can implement every day in the morning so that you start your day with a good mindset so that you can make it throughout your day. So I don't know how many of you, again, if you didn't watch part one, go and see it, but you can still grab my morning routine. It's like a free digital download. It has a example of exactly what my morning routine. It has a fillable one for you to make your own. Definitely drop in the chat if any of you guys already have a morning routine. So what I'm talking about is like you do this every morning. You get up, you go for a walk or for a run, you journal, you like for mine, like I get my glass of water, I put on my eye mask, I journal, I have my exercise, I go for a walk, right? Like I steam my face because I got to hydrate my face. I live in the desert, right? So like I have a whole routine and it just gets my mind right for all the heavy decision making, crazy, hectic schedule, everything I have to go through for the day. That is my time to like get my mind right. So I wanted you guys to do that so that you can start having a better mindset going into your days so that you can start making some of these decisions that we need to make to change your situation. So that's one of the things. The other thing that I've mentioned a lot in there, which I'm not going to be able to go into detail, is like identifying your emotional triggers, because there's probably certain specific things that are happening to you right now that are triggering you, right? Like a specific person, a specific event, a specific situation. And if we can identify those and reframe them, it just helps us. Again, it's a band aid. I'm not saying that just doing the morning routine and just doing the reframing is going to solve your problem. It just gets you to step number two. Okay. So after today, if you didn't get a chance to watch it, go back and watch it. Look at the free digital downloads I provided for the morning routine, for the triggers to try to help you get through that part. But let's go ahead and dive into part two, right? Because you guys are trying to fix your situation. You want to get in a better situation. Britta said she does have a morning routine. She goes for a walk in the morning. Yes, it's definitely, I love doing the walk in the morning part. And I'm so like, this is how much of an A personality I have. When I do the walk in the morning, I like to go when the sun is coming up, because that's when the sky is like, you get the oranges and purples and blues, and it's so pretty. And it just gives me a lot of perspective of like, I am one person in this big wide world, right? So it just always gives me like really good perspective. So now that the winter season is here, I had to like change my alarm to set the time so that when I'm going outside, it's the same time as when the sun is coming up. So anyways, I just digressed into that whole thing, but it's just what helps me. Like, it definitely helps me every morning. I notice a huge difference when I don't do it. Like, let's be honest, on like the weekends, sometimes I don't always want to get up and do it, but I always notice that it makes my energy and my demeanor different when I'm not doing those things. So yes. Oh yes. Hi. I feel like pro tips, morning routine, transferable into mindset. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so anyways, we're getting to the part two. Now I'm going to give you 10 questions. So be ready to take some notes. I'm going to give you 10 questions. I'm going to go through the questions really quick and then we're going to talk about them. But these are the 10 questions you need to ask yourself in order to get clarity on what you're dealing with right now. Okay? So I just want you to know, like, these are not going to be easy to answer questions, okay? Like you're in a difficult situation, so we're going to have to do some difficult, tough work to get you out of this situation. So I just want you to be open and honest when you're answering the questions, because if you really want to reduce your stress, if you really want to reduce like what you're dealing with, you're going to have, some tough conversations with yourself and be honest with yourself. Okay. So first one, what do you want to get out of the position that you're in right now? Like right now, the position you're in, what is it that you want to get out of it? Okay. And you don't have to put the answers in the chat if you don't want to. You might not know how to answer this right off the top of your head. Just write it down. And then, like I said, we'll talk about the question. So that's question one. What do you want to get out of the position right now? Number two, what do you want to get out of it in the future? When you first took the job, or you accepted the promotion, or you got in the position, you did so for a reason. You wanted something in the future. This is a stepping stone, maybe, or there were skills you wanted to get, or a company you wanted to start working with. What is it that you were hoping to get out of this in the future? Third question, what is in your control to change? So this is probably like a list of things you can list. What are things that are in your control to change, right? Like being understaffed, that's not really in your control to change, right? Like you don't have control over what the budget is. You don't have control over who applies. You don't have control over who stays, right? Like, so don't think about those things. Think about what is in your control to change, that you have 100% control of, to change about your situation. And again, just list what you can think of. Number four, this one might be tough for some of you. What type of boss are you dealing with? So a lot of people don't have maybe the best relationships with their boss, or maybe don't even understand that they don't have a good relationship with their boss, or feel like um there's not a problem, so that means like we don't have conflict, so it must be okay. Right. Right. So like part of this burnout struggle is the relationship you have with your boss. So I want you to talk about, like, what type of boss do you have? Do you have a boss that is um open and honest and communicative? Do you have a boss that is like super busy and hectic and you can never get with them? Do you have a boss that's micromanaging? Do you have a boss that's demanding? Do you have a boss that's like, oh, I'm good, and we're just like winging everything? Like, what kind of boss are you dealing with, right? Like, that's super important. What kind of boss are you dealing with? Okay. So then the next one, number five, these questions get harder as we go, okay? Like these questions are going to get harder for you in terms of your self-reflection. Are you spending times on the wrong, sorry, are you spending time on the wrong things? So when you think about the tasks that you're doing, the things that are burning you out, all the extra stuff that you have to do, all the to-do lists, all the um things on your plate, and like think about your personal things too, right? So like burnout isn't just about work. Like it's also like I need to have a life outside of work. I'm not able to get to the things I want outside of work, or I feel like I'm canceling my plans outside of work, right? So like think about both work things and personal things. And I want you to ask yourself, are those things adding value? So adding value at work in terms of your pay, promotion, development, right? Are they adding value to actually contributing towards something over in the job? And then are they adding value to your life? So your personal things, are they aligned with your vision that you have for your life, which means you have to have a vision of what you have for your life. And that's why I asked the question of like, what do you want in the future out of your position, right? So like, are you spending time on the wrong things to where you're not getting the results, right? Like you're not getting the results, and then you end up keep doing it more, like, well, maybe if I just keep doing this and keep doing this and keep doing this, but it's not working, and you're spending all your time on it, it's not getting you the results. So think about that. Number 6. So how did you get here? This didn't happen overnight, right? Like this didn't happen overnight. How did we get to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so burned out? Like, how did that happen? Did that happen because, like I said, maybe you're a person like me. I don't mind taking on new responsibilities. I don't mind trying different things. But maybe when I did that, I didn't set a boundary. And so now they expect me to do this all the time. Or maybe I originally thought I wanted to do it, but then once I started doing it, I was like, oh, I don't really like that anymore. And I don't know how to communicate that. I'm afraid of saying I don't want to do this anymore. So how did you get here? Is it just a time management thing? Like maybe like you're like, I just can't even figure out how to get organized because I have so much stuff going on. I don't even have time to sit and strategize and plan, right? Because if you don't make the time to strategize and plan, you're just putting out fires all the time. And when you're putting out fires all the time, you're not really getting results, right? So think about like what kind of things have happened to get here, right? Some of the things that you did, but it could be other things that were external forces that were outside of your control, right? So like again, a staffing thing, if people quit, if like unexpected things happen, systems broke down or projects came up unexpectedly, whatever. Like just put how did you get here? Number 7, this one, I don't know how easy it would be. Some people this might be easy for. Do you know how to say no professionally? And I put the caveat of professionally because I don't think everybody knows how to do that in a way. I've seen where people want to speak up for themselves and want to say no and want to set boundaries, but then they do it in a way that might be harmful to their career or their relationships or their reputation, right? So I just am curious if you have had success saying no professionally. That's going to help, right? Us determine like I said, the clarity of what you're going to do next. Number 8, we're almost at the end of the list. Number 8, are you in the right position for your skill set? So sometimes when people get burned out, it's because we all want that sense of accomplishment of like we're being challenged and we're doing something that we enjoy. And nobody likes doing something that they're not good at. Like legit, I don't want to go to work every day doing something I'm struggling at. And like that feels terrible. It feels so difficult. It feels like, why am I in this position? I start having imposter syndrome. I start doubting myself. I start losing confidence. And the truth might just be that this isn't the right position for your skill set. It doesn't mean that you're not skilled. It just might mean that this position isn't a good match. And sometimes what is valuable to you isn't valuable for the company or the department at that time. So it's not a knock on you, it's not a knock on them. It just means that you're not aligned. You're not aligned in like what they want and what you can bring are not a match. So that's important for you to know that. Like if you feel like you're just constantly struggling, maybe you're just not in the right position, right? And that is actually probably a little bit easier to fix if you're just like, oh, I'm just not in the right position, assuming the company that you work for has options for you. Otherwise, it's back to looking for another job. 9. This one is tough, so you might not be able to answer this without doing some deeper reflection. But what is your walking away point? So, what is the point that you are so burned out that you're gonna this is what we tend to do. We let ourselves get so miserable and get so miserable and so miserable and so miserable, and then we finally are like, I have to quit. But we've like let this go on for so long to where we're like defeated and we're drained and we're like so not ready to be in the job market, right? Like you don't want to go in the job market like that where you have to deal with rejection and interviews and like all the stuff. So you need to determine what your walking away point is, hopefully before you get that beat down. Like you don't want to be so burned out and then turn around and have to be in the job searching is hard. Like job searching is not easy. It's not quick. You have to deal with rejection, you have to deal with confidence stuff. Like it just, you don't want to be so beat down. So you need to think about what your walking away point is. And typically it's going to be based on some of those other answers, right? Like what kind of boss are you dealing with? How did you get here? What do you want out of the position? That's going to help you kind of figure out what your walking away point is. And then number 10 is the most important question. Like I couldn't make this list without this question because this is the one people forget. And this is where like that regret comes in. If you walk away, what else are you walking away from? If you walk away, what else are you walking away from? And again, this is one of those things where I was like, you have to be in the right mindset when you sit down and answer these questions. Because when you're if you were like just had a shitty day and just had like a rough day and it was rough and you tried to answer these questions, your answers would be completely different than if you like, oh, I just went on my walk and I have my coffee and now I can sit with a clear mind and answer my questions, right? So like if you have a shitty day and then go try to answer these questions, you're gonna be like, I'm walking away today. I don't give a shit. I don't want to do this anymore. Like you're going to be in a totally negative space because you can't see beyond how you're feeling in the moment, right? So like you've got to get to a place where you can answer these questions. So let's talk about the questions. So like, again, those are the 10 questions. I hope you wrote them down. If you didn't, then again, watch the replay and get all the questions, but we're going to talk about what these questions mean. And then we're going to talk about what to do because that's what you were really here for. Like you want to know what to actually do, right? Okay. It's probably going to take you some time to answer these questions. I don't expect you to be able to answer them all in like a 10-minute time span. I would say if you could answer these questions in 10 minutes, like if while I was doing this, you got good answers to all those questions, then the truth is you already know what you need to do. You already know what you need to do. You just have been hesitating. You're hesitating to do what you know needs to be done, right? So the real question really is what is stopping you from doing what it is you need to do. But if you're like everybody else and you're like, I'm not really sure what I want to do or how to get out of this or how I got to this place, then let's talk about these questions and what they really mean and how you can get clarity, because the clarity is key before we get to the next step, which is actually taking action. You got to have the right clarity so you know what to take action on that's going to actually help you, right? So, okay. So to me, couple of the key questions that I'm looking at my notes. Sorry, if I'm not looking at you guys, I'm looking at my notes. If you get stuck on answering some of these or you're unsure, then that's clarity in itself, right? So if you get stuck on a question because you're like, I don't really know the answer to this question, then that's the clarity of this is the part that I need help with. This is what I need help with if I can't answer this question. When you answer the question, whatever the answer is going to be like, oh, okay, so this is the kind of boss I'm dealing with. Maybe I need to change how I'm dealing with my boss. Maybe I don't have as good rapport as I thought. Maybe we're not having frequent enough or effective enough conversations. Maybe the way my boss acts, right? Like you can't control your boss's personality, but maybe how they act is influencing why you're afraid to speak up, right? So that could be where you're getting stuck. For example, maybe number 6. So number 6 was, how did you get here? So like that could be a huge one where you're getting stuck because maybe you're just like, I honestly don't know. This is what I've always done. This is the type of person I have. I have a good work ethic. I was taught that I'm supposed to come in and like give my best. And anytime they ask me to take on something else, that's what I'm supposed to do because I don't want them to think I'm not a team player. Or I don't want them to think, that I don't want to move up. Like maybe that's just maybe that is genuinely what you think and you have no idea where the disconnect is. Like maybe you just really are not sure what's going on. So that is where you're like, okay, I need somebody to help me figure out like what am I doing wrong? You know, like is it my own expectation? Like is do I have these? So what I talk to people when they're especially starting a new job is like you have these expectations in your mind that you think it's what you're supposed to be doing, but you never actually hear that. You never actually have somebody tell you that. It's just what you think you're supposed to be doing. So that you end up spending your time working on these things that don't really add value. And then you're not getting recognized for them. And then like when you're not getting recognized, we tend to either do more things because we're like, well, obviously I'm not doing enough because I'm not getting recognized for the things I'm doing. So I either do more things or I build resentment because I'm not getting recognized for the things I do. And both of those are leading you to burnout, right? Because when you do more things and do more things and do more things, obviously you're taking on so much, but then you're still losing that confidence because you're like, I'm not getting recognized. And it's because you might be working on the wrong activities. And it's because you have expectations in your mind that are not the same as your bosses or the teams or the company's expectations. When you build the resentment side of things, if you go the more, well, I'm just going to stop doing this because they're not even recognizing me and I don't want to do this anymore, it leads to the same burnout. Maybe your workload isn't as busy as this other person, but again, nobody wants to go to work every day and not feel good about their contributions and not feel accomplished and not feel good about that. So that leads to a burnout in a different way. Your burnout is honestly, it's emotional, right? Like it's emotional. It is built by all these external factors for sure, but it is emotional. And so those emotions can come from either of those ways. So a couple more questions I want to get through, and then, like I said, I want to talk to you how to fix them because it's about 10:30 and I don't want to run out of time. I want to make sure you guys also have time to ask me any questions. Real quick, just like because are any of these questions like ringing resonating with you? Like, is there anything that's like any number any? Oh my gosh, I can't talk. I should have had coffee, Britta. Which number 1 through 10, like resonated with you where you're like, ooh, I think this is my problem. So like drop that in the chat if there's like one in particular that you're like, I think this is the one. I think this is the one that it is, right? So number 8, I want to talk about number 8. Are you in the right position for your skill set? This happens like more commonly than you might realize. Again, managing teams of people, like up to 50 people, different departments, different stuff. Like when you're in the wrong position, it can definitely hurt. But it is something where once you realize it, it's easy to fix. So this is probably the one, like I said, is as but if you don't know how to realize it, right, that can be where you get stuck and you get stuck and you get stuck and it breaks your confidence. So Britta said number 6 for her. How did I get here? Okay. How did I get here? So that's definitely something we could talk about more. Number 10, losing something else equally valuable is worth staying, or losing burnout situation depleted of value. Yes. So like I can give you, so let me get through. So 8, and then I'll talk about 10. I have an actual live example of like my life, right? So with 8, when you're not sure, like if you're in the right skill set, it's going to start to break like your confidence. And it is like for me, when I first struggled with this, it was like a blind spot to me. Like I didn't realize, right? I didn't have self-awareness. I did not have enough self-awareness. I thought I did. Like I thought I knew exactly what I was doing and what I should be doing. But it took me getting some feedback that was like, you maybe don't realize that you don't have the skill set for this position. But let's talk about what skills you do have and for what position that works for, right? So that's just one thing that, again, it can be hard for people if they're not self-aware, they're not willing to get that feedback. But as soon as you figure it out, it's like definitely an easy fix. Number 10. So number 10 is, what are you giving up? So when I started with Covington, like I said, it was a startup company, like starting from scratch. Like we had to build the team, we had to build the processes, we had to build the customers, the sales, I mean everything, right? So it was like me and like 3 other people, the owners and like the other leaders. And probably like 9 months in, I was ready to quit. I mean, because again, if you've never worked in a startup, it is a grind. It is like a mental fucking grind because you have to strategize and make decisions every day, and the implications of these decisions are very big. So it can be very intimidating, it can be very mentally draining, it can cause conflict, right, like between you and the other people on your team. So I was literally like, I'm quitting this job. Like, and, if, and anybody who knows me, I've talked about quitting Covington like probably every year for 5 years. I've worked there for 5 years and I've probably talked about quitting every year because what ends up happening is I always think about what would I give up if I were to leave Covington? If I were to leave this job, what would I be giving up in addition to that? So not just the pay, because obviously like the pay is important, like, but you can make money other places. You can make money doing other things. But there were other benefits I got in the position that I wasn't willing to give up. That I was like, when I sat back and realized, I'm like, okay, I have so much autonomy. I have so much freedom. I have an opportunity to work on things that when you work in a corporate job, so like when I worked at Drive Time, for example, love Drive Time. Don't get me wrong. Drive Time is amazing. Culture amazing, great place. But when you're dealing with a place that's so big like that, they're very corporate in the sense that like you gotta if you want to make any changes you have to ask this person who has to ask this person who has to ask. It takes forever. It takes forever to get any changes implemented. It takes forever to get any process changes. It takes forever for hiring and staffing and recruiting. It's such a struggle when you're like, I want to hurry up and be able to implement some changes and you have to be told to wait. So for me with Covington, some of the benefits of staying there is like my autonomy, my freedom of my schedule, obviously my pay and bennies and all the other good stuff that came with being a high level, executive in a company, but the experience and the development and the opportunity that I got that I knew was setting me up. Like I took that job to set me up for a future transition. I didn't take that job just for that job, right? Like I took it because I wanted to get something out of it that was going to help me in the future. So when I thought about every time I've thought about quitting, I'm like, no, I don't want to give that up, but I need this to look different from what it is right now. I can't continue doing it the way that it is being done. So every time I got to that moment where I was like, I'm getting to my breaking point, right? Like I'm getting to my point where my walk away point is, I was like, do I want to walk away? Nope. Well, then we need to fix it. We need to fix what's happening so that I don't want to walk away, so that I'm back over here in happy land, right? So that's what we're going to talk about with you guys. So I'm going to drop in a link that hopefully will work. It's going to take you to my Dropbox folder that has a free digital download in it. And let's see if it'll work. So you guys tell me if that works or not, but it should take you to a Dropbox folder that has a digital download in it called Smart Goals and Success Habits. It is a fillable download. We are going to talk about it together. I don't know how to share my screen on YouTube because this is the only time I've done YouTube Live. This is only the second time I've done YouTube Live. So I have it on my screen. If you want to pull it up on your screen, I'm going to go through it. But this is how we're going to actually take action steps to get you out of the situation you're in. Okay. So, those 10 questions, I want you to sit and actually answer those questions. If you're getting stuck on any of the questions, I'm going to mention this later, but like my plan is just to give you anybody who attended who wants to do a 30-minute clarity call or validation call. So, if you're stuck on the questions and you don't even have clarity on how to set up these next action steps, then you need a clarity call. So it's 30 minutes with me free. Like I just want to help you get clarity and then you will do the action steps. Or if you're like, yep, I 100% have clarity. I know what I need to fix. I know which area I'm struggling. Maybe you don't know how to fix it, but you just know which area you're struggling with. So if it's your boss, if it's not knowing how you got here, like Britta said, if it's not knowing what your breaking point is, if it's whatever, if you're not getting out of the job what you think you should have, like what you wanted to get out of it, if it's not knowing if you're in the right job for your skill set and you're feeling like less confident that you're able to do the job, like whatever it is, you want to have clarity on that before you get to this next step. So again, I will put more information on that later, but let's talk about this download. Did you guys? Yes, she said the link works. Thank you. Okay, so then the first part of figuring out what you're going to do next, this is a 5-step SMART goal setup here. So what are you focusing on right now, right? So whatever that clarity piece was that you got, that's the piece that you need to focus on. So you've already answered question 1. What are you focused on right now? And then number 2, I really want you, it's so important. It's so important that you imagine what it's going to be like when you're out of this situation, right? What is it going to be like for you to make this change? It's not just about like, oh, I have my time back. That's great. What are you going to do with your time? Is it going to allow you to be more available in your relationships with your family, with your kids, with spouses, with friends? Is it going to allow you to have more of your own like personal time? Is it going to allow you to travel? Is it going to allow you to sleep better? Is it going to allow you to develop yourself better? Like, what is it going to do for you when you are no longer so burned out from work that it's not like spilling into your personal life, right? So I want you to think about that, because we have to have that vision in our mind of what we're working towards. You have to have that in your mind, because this isn't going to be easy, and it's going to take some time. Like I said, this is a 30-day setup that we're working on right here. So you need something to help, the light at the end of the tunnel of like, I'm working towards this. This is what I'm working towards. So make sure that you really actually put what that's going to look like for you. And then when we move on, so the next step, what obstacles might you face? So you might not be able to identify every obstacle, but just think about some of the obstacles you face now. So if you're talking about, okay, I want to have better conversations with my boss. Well, what obstacles are you going to face? Scheduling problems. Maybe you don't know how to have, maybe you don't know that person's communication style. So you got to figure out how to have conversations. Maybe you need to work on your communication skills, right? If you're thinking, okay, I want to set different boundaries with my schedule, what obstacles might you face? So is this a situation where it's like they're going to push back on me and they're going to make me feel bad? What might you face? And of course, we tend to like, if you guys are like me, I tend to think of every freaking negative scenario in the world. And they might not ever happen, right? But I always am like, well, what if they say this? And what if this happens? And what if this happens? Throw that in here. This is where that goes. Okay. So get it out of your mind. Stop spiraling into thinking what everybody is going to say or do or how they're going to react. Just put it here. Okay. So what obstacles might you face as you try to make this change, based on whatever your clarity piece was? Okay. And then how are you going to overcome them is what your motivating factors are. So if you haven't heard, like, again, I have tons of content about this on my socials and on YouTube, but your motivating factors, you have your intrinsic motivation, you have your extrinsic motivation. You need to know what is going to help push you. And like, if it's an easy way to think about this, like, aside from the burnout, just think about like when you are just trying to accomplish something at work, right? Like, are you a person who likes external like recognition? Like, do you want to be praised publicly in front of people? Do you want to be like the top of the leaderboard? Do you want in a meeting for you to be recognized? Do you want like what, like, is that something that you like? Or are you more a person who's like, no, I just want to be recognized like personally by my boss, throw an extra bonus? Maybe you're money motivated. You're like, I'll take the extra bonus money. I'll take any extra perks. I'll take any extra, money factors. For me, my intrinsic motivation is like I like the sense of accomplishment. So I don't necessarily like to have a bunch of recognition, and it kind of goes with my, like, I want to have autonomy too. Like, when you have autonomy, you're not going to get a lot of recognition because you have autonomy, right? So like for me, I don't necessarily need all the recognition because I have autonomy, but I do like to feel accomplished. I do like to feel like I got stuff done. So even if I have like a goal of like, okay, I need to get this done, I'm going to make a checklist and I'm going to like check this stuff off because I like feeling like I have checked things off of my list. Now, if I make my list crazy long and ridiculous and unrealistic, then it's going to make me feel like I didn't accomplish anything that day, even though I can say logically this was unrealistic. That's not how our psychology works, right? So like, you have to know what your motivating factors are so that you can make these changes and change your habits, which is what we're going to talk about now. So you need to know what those are. Again, I have some content about that on my site. Again, if you need to set up a 30-minute call, we can go through some of this stuff together. So now we get to the meat, the goal, which is the action step that you are going to take based on the clarity that you got from answering the questions. You are going to set a goal, preferably 3, that you can do in the next 30 days to move you closer to accomplishing this, right? So again, I'm just going to keep using the boss example because I talk about it a lot with people. People tend to not have good relationships with their bosses. So if your goal is to speak up to your boss because you want to be able to set better boundaries, because you want to be able to say like, hey, I think that this is too much on my plate, without it coming back to hurt you, without you feeling like you're going to get in trouble, without you feeling like they're going to judge you, then you need to have a better relationship with your boss. so that you can do that, right? So step one, like goal one, and if you see on my download, it's SMART goals. SMART goals, I'm sure you've heard of it: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time oriented. If you don't make them SMART goals, you're never going to accomplish them, right? So it wouldn't just be like, oh, in the next 30 days, I'm going to have a conversation with my boss. That's not a SMART goal. That's not even, that's not you. You've probably been saying that to yourself for months, right? So like, that's not it. So you need to be super specific of like, I'm going to set up a 30-minute meeting or 1 hour meeting, I guess, depending on your schedule and their schedule. I'm going to set up a meeting, and my objective for this meeting is X, right? So your first meeting out the gate, you're probably not going to feel comfortable enough to be like, hey, I need to talk to you about all of these feelings and all of these problems. So don't make that your goal, because then you're never going to schedule the meeting. You're never going to schedule the meeting if you make this big, crazy goal. So why don't you just make the first goal of like, I just want to build more rapport. I just want to go in with the objective of building a rapport so that I start to feel safe and build trust with my boss, so that at some point in the future, I can finally tell her how I really feel, or him how I really feel, right? So, like, maybe objective one is like, let's just have a one on one. Let's just get to know each other better so that I can start to make myself feel more comfortable, right? Maybe your second goal is, I need to work on my communication skills in some way because I don't know how to bring this topic up. So maybe what you need to do is practice someplace outside of work where you feel safe with a friend or family member or a coach or Toastmasters. I talk about Toastmasters of like, it's a safe place for you to practice your communication skills. Maybe that's another goal you set up. Like, I'm going to have 1 or 2 sessions with a friend or family member or somebody I trust to like role play this conversation so that it builds your confidence in having the conversation. That could be your second goal. And then like your third goal could be, I'm going to um I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head, but your third goal still needs to be something with the boss. So maybe it's like, I'm going to talk to a coworker to get their opinion of how I'm going to talk to my boss. So you need to be specific of like, I need to pick a coworker. I need to have a deadline of which I'm going to talk to them and like the questions that I'm going to ask them. And again, pick somebody that you trust that's not going to run back to your boss and say something, but just like, who do you feel comfortable enough to be like, hey, I want to approach this subject with this other person. You know, you seem to have a good relationship with you. Do you have any advice for me? Blah, 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 blah. Right. So like, that's just an example. These are just 3 goals. If you're stuck someplace else, so like Britta, you said you're stuck on how did I get here? So then your goals are going to look different, right? Like your goals are going to have to be like, one, you're going to need to like backtrack on, you're going to need to you're going to have like a goal for like, if I was just coaching you, I would be like, your first goal is to schedule weekly reflection of what you're doing at work. So like every Friday, at the end of your Friday, before you like just cut off and go to the weekend, my goal would be for you to spend 30 minutes every Friday to reflect on what happened that week, because you're not having enough like you don't have enough, and I'm not saying this in a disparaging way, but you don't have enough awareness of what is happening and how you're getting here, because you're probably so busy that you're never taking time to process it. And it's not like, again, it's not a negative reflection on you. That's just what happens when we're busy. Like, it's just what happens when you're like, I have so much to do, I don't even have time to think. And that's where you're probably at. It's like, you haven't even had time to think about, is this the right thing? Is this not the right thing? Is this the proper expectation? Is it not the proper expectation? Like, you don't even know where to get started. So I would say my first goal for you, 30 minutes Fridays, you need to do something like that, right? The second goal for you, so then it's like, what are you going to do with that information? Right? So then my second goal for you would be like, you need to pick one thing to work on from your list. Like, because you can't do everything at once. Like I said, we didn't get here overnight. Don't think that you're going to be like, I'm going to fix this and this and this and this, right? So as you kind of see and start reflecting and see where you get here, then your goal would be like, by the end of the month, right? You need to pick a focus, because you obviously can't get through the rest of this if you don't pick a focus. So like, that would be like another goal of like, it's specific. So make it more specific of, I'm going to have a specific focus, measurable by the end of the month, attainable. You absolutely can, as long as you do the first goal, right? Relevant, and obviously it's going to help you with your burnout. So it might take you a little bit longer because you got to work through that first part, but that's just an example, right? So So yes, so I hope that makes sense. If not, I just know that like I'm kind of rushing through this end piece a little bit because I want to make sure I give you guys time to ask me any questions if you have any questions. But that's the goal, smart action steps, and then the building success habits. So if you go to the next page, step 4, where it says build success habits. So once you kind of have your goal, a lot of people think that's the end of like, I've set my goal and it's just going to happen. It's just going to happen by itself. And it never works that way. You have to actually change what you're doing. You have to stop doing something and you have to start doing something. Sometimes maybe it's just one or the other, but usually you have to stop doing something and start doing something. So like, let's just use like dieting as an example because everybody understands dieting, right? Like if you want to change your, um, how you feel, your energy. Like I'm not a fan of like dieting just to like lose like calorie counting, but like the whole idea of why you diet is because you want to feel different. And the whole reason why we're doing this is because you want to feel different, right? So what do you need to change in your behavior? When you're dieting, you usually have to stop eating certain foods or change the time that you eat or change the quantity that you eat, right? Like you have to change something, you have to stop doing something, and then you have to start doing something, right? When you're dieting, you have to add more protein or add more exercise or add more water, right? Like, so with the work, it's the same thing. These work goals, what do you have to stop doing? Well, you have to stop ignoring the problem, right? Like, you have to stop like hoping that this goes away. You have to stop thinking about the things you can't control. You have to stop being like, oh, well, as soon as we hire another person, it's going to be okay. As soon as this project is finished, it's going to be okay. Like, no, it's not. Like that, there's always going to be something else. There's always going to be something else that gets in the way. Stop doing that, right? So stop these external thoughts, right? And then what do we need to start doing? Well, we need to start reflecting more, right? And these are just general things. You're going to need to be more specific in your habits based on your goals, but because I don't know what your goals are, I'm giving you some general ideas, but you're going to need to be more reflective. You're going to definitely need to be more self-aware. You're going to definitely need to work on your communication skills and confidence to build up that confidence to be ready to speak up about whatever choice that you make based on the clarity factors, right? Like you're going to need to start doing those things. And how you build your confidence might look different for everybody, but what I say, I said this in my video the other day, competence builds confidence, right? The more you practice something, the more you get better at something. That's why I was saying practice role playing with your friends, practice having the conversation. We usually go to our friends and we just vent and complain, but then that's not helpful. Like, I mean, it might help because you just need to get it out. Like, so I'm not like saying don't ever vent, but what is that? That's not giving you a solution, right? Like, so if you need to vent, then the real question is, hey, like, I want to try to say this. Can you, like, what do you guys think about that? Like, what would you say, right? Go to somebody and have that conversation. Don't just complain about what's going on. Let's talk about, can you help me actually, like, fix this? Can you help me actually figure this out, right? So, like, just practice. Competence builds confidence, right? Because that's really what you need when you want to be able to speak up and get yourself out of these tough situations. And then the last piece is super important. I keep talking about reflection. You got to reflect on how you feel at the end of the month. So that's why I said you got to have your first in the beginning. How are you going to feel when this changes? What's your light at the end of the tunnel? What are you working towards? How is it going to change you? How is it going to change your life? And then we're going to reflect and be like, did we get that or not? And is it because you were too afraid to take action? Is it because maybe your goals were not as smart as they could have been? Like maybe they weren't as attainable and so you didn't do them? Is it because the habits you didn't stop doing the stuff and start doing the stuff? Like what happened to keep you from getting this feeling you said you wanted? Like what happened? Why didn't we get that? And let's just adjust. Let's not beat ourselves up. Let's not decrease our confidence anymore by feeling guilty about it. Let's just adjust and think about what we need to do next time. Okay. So again, I know I ran that through that so fast, but we've only got like 9 minutes left. So if you guys have questions, drop your questions in the chat. I'm happy to help you if you want to talk about your specific thing. I know Holly, I didn't see if you said what specific number or like what specific thing that you're dealing with. Britta, if you have any follow-up questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. Okay, so Britta says, I love the idea of having one focus, but what happens to everything else won't get done if I don't do it. So I think if I understand what you're asking me, you're asking about focusing on one thing to change at work, right? Like you want to change one thing, but these other things still have to get done. So the best way that I can explain it is you're going to have to pick which one is going to have the most impact. You're not going to be I am such a hyper achiever that I feel like I could do everything. Like I could do it all. But the thing is, these changes are hard. Like emotion, like you're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. So that's already like hard emotionally. And if you want to be more successful, I always recommend just doing one at a time because then you can kind of get through that faster and then move on to the next thing. So what I mean by that is like, okay, focus on this one thing. And maybe for 30 days, it's this one thing. And then the next 30 days is something else. And then the next 30 days is something else. So maybe you haven't solved it entirely in 30 days, but maybe you've moved it to a place where now it's not the priority and you could focus on this other thing that's the priority, right? So like if they're all at the low level and you're like, okay, I moved this one up and the next month I'm going to do this. And the next month we're coming back and the next month we're coming back. So maybe that's the way you need to do it, but don't try to do this because you're now splitting your energy in two different ways. You're also one of the things that, again, as a problem solving tip for operations professionals, when you work on two, you need to have a, what do they call it? A control of like, if you work on both things at the same time, then you don't know what really was the issue, especially since you're saying you don't really know how you got here. How are you going to know which is the one that impacts you the most if you try to improve them at the same time? Like in a science experience, but when they have a control group and a non-control group. So you kind of need to have a control of like, I think this is the one that if I fix it has the most impact. So I'm going to try to work on this. And then maybe you're like, that didn't work. I'm going to come over here, but don't keep doing this because you need to have a control of like, this is actually the thing that I need to be focused on. And I'm going to get this to here and this can stay down here because it actually doesn't even impact me as much as I thought it did. Right. But if you try to do this, you don't really know what's working. And you're just not ever as like, personally, again, I've tried to do it. You're just not as good when you're splitting your energy. So you're not going to be able to do like this. What's going to happen is it's just going to get here, right? But wouldn't it be better if you could be like this and then this and this and this? Like, so I don't know if that made any sense, but I just feel like for me, I feel like focus on one thing that you think is going to make the most impact. What is going to make the most impact? Um, and then focus on that for 30 days. And then if it gets to a place where it's better and you're like, wow, that made a huge difference, I can now move on to this other focus. It doesn't mean that you never have to go back to this. Like self-development is continuous forever, right? Like it is, because what's going to happen is as you get better at it, more difficult challenges will come to you, right? So like it's not like you never have to come back to it again. It's just I could put this on the shelf for now and I could focus on something else. So that would just be my recommendation. Um, okay, so yes, you said that helped. Perfect. If anybody else has any questions, we're going to wrap up here with this last 5 minutes. So I promised you that I was going to give you this link. So let me go ahead and drop it in. It is the link to schedule the 30-minute free session with me. So this again can be to help get clarity on your questions. So if you're not sure, you're stuck on your questions and you don't have clarity on like what focus you need to focus on for the next 30 days, then let's talk about that and get you some clarity. If you feel like you have clarity and you know what you want to focus on and you just want a validation call to be like, hey, did I set up my goals right? Did I talk about these habits right? Like I'm on the right track. If you just want a validation call to like help with the confidence and help make sure that you're moving forward, then schedule the 30 minutes. It takes you to my Calendly. Because I know everybody's super busy, I try to leave my schedule flexible as much as possible. Like once you pick a date, if for some reason I can't do it, I'll obviously let you know. But I try to be very flexible because I know that you're like me, you have a busy schedule. That's why I was like, self-development Saturday is the key because you know what? When I'm finished with a hard day of work, you know what I don't want to do is more development. So I feel like Saturday kind of made sense for me, but something else might work better for you depending on what your work schedule. Maybe you have a different day off from work. Maybe you have like half days some days. Maybe you have lighter days some days. Like whatever works for you, just kind of let me know. I feel like this was super valuable, like in my mind. So you guys tell me like if this was valuable, if this helped you, if you feel like you have like a starting point, like drop that in the chat. Like I really just wanted this to be something that you could feel like, okay, there is a way for me to get out of this. There is some hope to get out of this. So I really hope you felt that. Make sure if you do post, please put hashtag self-development Saturday and help me spread the word. The video, like I said, will be posted in a couple of days. Like YouTube takes a while, so just subscribe to my channel and it'll like tell you when my new videos post. I try to post new videos like once every couple weeks. You can also subscribe. Actually, I can drop that link in as well. I have a weekly career confidence newsletter that I put out that just kind of gives, again, a little bit more tips each week, like more than what I put out on my social media, because I feel like people who are in my community, I want to make sure that I'm sharing something that's valuable to them. And so I'll put the link to that if you want to. Sorry, my link over here isn't working. Okay, if you want to join my newsletter, you can definitely join the weekly newsletter as well to get information. But honestly, like, just all I care about is like, if this works for you, just tell me. Like, just drop on my social or drop in my, DMs. I just really want to know if you were able to like get some value out of this, if you were able to get something, out of it. Just let me know, in the next week, if you're starting to feel better, if the things are starting to work. I just love to hear what your experience is. Other than that, I hope everybody has a great Saturday, and I will see you next Saturday for part 3, which is setting up your long term solutions to prevent burnout again in the future. Have a good day.